Music. There's something about the boardwalk at night that feels different. Like the air itself carries memories that refuse to fade. The salty wind whispers against your skin. The sound of waves collides with the faint creak of wooden planks. And the glowing lights that seem so magical during the day now flicker with something darker. It's the kind of place where joy once danced freely, where children laughed and lovers held hands, but after the crowds disappear, it becomes something else entirely. The laughter echoes in ways that don't sound human anymore. The rides seem to breathe. The shadows between the planks stretch longer than they should. Some say the boardwalk never truly sleeps. It remembers. And maybe, just maybe, it hungers. Welcome to the world of 4 creepy true boardwalk horror stories. Tonight, we walk along the edge of the ocean and stare into its secrets. These aren't just stories meant to frighten, they're stories meant to awaken something inside you. Because behind every scream is a lesson. Behind every ghost is a memory of what it means to survive. These stories will chill your bones. Yes, but they will also remind you of something powerful. Courage, faith, and the strange beauty that exists even in darkness. So take a deep breath, hold your courage close, and don't look back. Once you start walking the boardwalk after midnight, it doesn't like when you stop. It began with Clara. She was 19, working her final week at a small snack shack by the pier before heading off to college. The summer air was thick with humidity, and every night, she closed the shop long after the tourists had gone home. The path back to her car stretched across the silent pier, where the water whispered and the light posts hummed low and tired. She'd walk quickly, keys clutched tight in her fists, pretending not to hear the faint creaking underneath, the shifting of old wood, or maybe footsteps that didn't belong to her. But one night was different. It was quieter than usual. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. As she turned the key in the lock, she heard something, a faint humming beneath the pier, like a lullaby carried on the wind. At first, she smiled, thinking it must be a child still playing near the beach. But when she called out, the voice stopped. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, wrong. Then, clear as day, she heard a whisper, a voice, identical to hers, softly repeating, "Hello." Clara froze. The world around her seemed to tilt. Her heart thundered as the voice repeated the word again. This time, closer, right beneath her feet. The boards shivered under her shoes as if something large moved beneath them. She ran, sprinting down the pier, the laughter of her own voice chasing her, taunting, echoing, twisted into something inhuman. When she reached her car, she dared to look back. And there, beneath the last streetlight, she saw at her own shadow waving from beneath the pier. She quit the next morning, never returning to that boardwalk again. But even years later, she'll awake in the night to hear her own voice whispering from the corners of her dreams, calling her back. Fear, as Clara learned, isn't always an enemy. Sometimes, it's the only thing that saves you. She trusted her instincts too late, but the lesson lives on. In life, we often silence that quiet inner voice, one that warns us, the one that begs us to turn around, to stop, to listen. But our instincts are ancient. They are our soul's memory of survival. When something inside you says run, it's not weakness. It's wisdom. It's your body remembering danger before your mind can understand it. Trust it. It may save your life. Fear is not always there to paralyze you. Sometimes it's a compass pointing toward truth, away from harm, toward safety and light. Clara's story reminds us that survival begins, not with strength, but with awareness. That quiet whisper deep inside of you, it's not madness. It's protection. And sometimes, that whisper is the only thing standing between you and the darkness that waits below the pier. The second story came from an older man who worked the boardwalk in Atlantic City during the 1950s. He spoke of a carousel that once sat near the masterpiece of color and sound that children adored. But one night, during a violent summer storm, the ride began to turn on its own. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the painted horses in flashes of blue and white. A group of teenagers had broken into the fairgrounds to take one last wild ride before the storm grew too fierce. They laughed as the music began, distorted and slow, like an old record dragging to its end. The carousel spun faster and faster until the laughter turned to screams. When the storm passed, the ride was gone. All that remained was an empty pit, filled with seawater. Some say the ocean swallowed it whole. Others claim it was never built at all. But on still nights, when thunder rolls in the distance, locals swear they can hear carousel music playing faintly over the waves. That carousel was a symbol of what we often forget. Control is an illusion. Life spins faster than we can hold it sometimes. We cling to people, to plans, to comfort, believing we can stop the storm. But storms do not wait for our consent. They come to teach us humility, to remind us that sometimes the only control we truly have is how we choose to endure. The lesson is surrender, not defeat. To bend like the wind, not break against it. Life isn't always meant to be mastered. Sometimes it's meant to be survived. The third story was whispered by a fisherman from Maine, about an old lighthouse that still stands on the outskirts of a forgotten town. A caretaker and his son once lived there, isolated by fog and endless tides. The boy grew up with only his father and the sea for company. He'd talk to the fog, laugh at invisible companions, and wave at ships that never stopped. Then one winter, he vanished. The footprints led to the water's edge and stopped. They never found him. But on nights, when fog swallowed the boardwalk, sailors swore they saw the boy's face in the waves, smiling faintly before disappearing beneath the surface. It's a lonely story, a reminder that isolation can drown us in ways deeper than the sea. Sometimes we're surrounded by people and still feel unseen, unheard. That loneliness can eat away at even the strongest heart. But if you ever feel that emptiness creeping in, remember, connection is not weakness. Asking for help, reaching out, admitting your struggle in it's not shameful. It's survival. We're meant to share the storm, not face it alone. Another tale tells of a rusted Ferris wheel that stood silent for decades in a forgotten part of New Jersey's Boardwalk. Locals avoided it, saying it was cursed. Then one night, it began to move again slowly, creaking against the wind. A man stood before it, watching. He had once been a child when the Ferris wheel stopped midair, trapping him and his brother during a mechanical failure. His brother had fallen. He had lived. He'd spent years running from the memory, pretending it never happened. But guilt always finds its way home. That night, as the Ferris wheel turned, he wept. The ride creaked to a stop at the very top, one empty seat swaying in the cold wind. Some said they saw two silhouettes sitting there before it froze again. The man never returned. The ghosts that haunt us most aren't always spirits, they're our regrets. They're the things we never said, the forgiveness we never gave, the healing we never allowed ourselves to have. The Ferris wheel reminds us that the past keeps turning until we decide to stop it ourselves. Face what haunts you. Forgive yourself before it's too late. In Coney Island, there was once a fortune teller named Madame Lyra who never charged money for readings. Instead, she'd hand her customers a slip of paper and ask them to write down their greatest fear. One young girl wrote, "Losing my brother." Lyra smiled sadly and said, "Then don't feed it." But the girl didn't understand. Weeks later, her brother drowned off the pier. People said Lyra's predictions cursed people, but maybe it wasn't her power that doomed them. Maybe it was fear itself. Fear, when fed, grows. The more we dwell on what we dread, the more we summon it. Sometimes we become our own curse. So don't speak your fears as prophecies. Speak your hopes instead. What you focus on becomes your reality. Choose faith over fear. Then came the story of the lifeguard, young and arrogant, who ignored the red flags of an incoming riptide to impress his friends. A child drowned that day. The boy's body washed ashore hours later, and the lifeguard's laughter never returned. They say his whistle still echoes on the beach at dusk. Some nights, when the waves are calm, people hear it, a long, lonely sound carried by the wind. Denial kills. Sometimes courage, ice and tea. About saving others as about admitting when we wrong before our pride destroys us. Truth is painful, but it's the only way to cleanse the soul. Another story tells of an old photo booth that once stood near the boardwalk's edge. They said it could capture more than just your reflection, it could show your fate. People would enter smiling and leave trembling, clutching their photos with pale hands. One man saw his own image standing beside a figure that wasn't there, a dark outline, mirroring his pose perfectly. Weeks later, he vanished. Some said the photo took his soul. Others whispered he simply met his shadow. But maybe the mirror wasn't cursed at all. Maybe it showed people what they were too afraid to see. The darkness we fear most isn't outside, it's within. We all have parts of ourselves we try to bury, pain we refuse to face. But healing begins when we look straight into that reflection and say, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." And then, finally, there was the girl and the roller coaster. She had loved it as a child, riding every summer with her mother, their laughter echoing across the ocean. But after her mother died, she refused to ride it again. It was too painful, too full of ghosts. Until one night, she heard a voice soft, familiar, saying, "I'm still here." She got on the coaster one last time. As it climbed higher, the wind kissed her cheeks like her mother's hands once did. When it plunged, she screamed not in fear, but in release. In that moment, she realized something eternal. Love never dies. It changes shape, but it never leaves. The boardwalk holds countless stories, some tragic, some tender, all haunted by echoes of the past. But if there's one truth buried beneath its creaking boards and ghostly laughter, it's this: even in the darkest corners, hope flickers like a stubborn light, refusing to go out. Fear will chase you, yes, but so will faith. Pain will find you, but so will healing. The ocean roars, the wind howls, and somewhere beyond the pier, the carousel turns again. But this time, you're not afraid. You walk forward, eyes open, heart steady, because you know now, fear isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of courage. May your path be lit by faith, your heart guarded by wisdom, and your soul reminded that even in the chill of horror, there is always warmth to be found in the light that refuses to fade. Amen.